Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bootstrap Solo. My name is Pratik Shah, and today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly about running your own practice. This podcast is for those that want to know what it's really like to start, run, and grow a practice. Today's guest is my good friend, Ali Razavi. He runs a 30-person practice out of Orange County that focuses on personal injury. He started his practice back in 2016, has been growing strong ever since. Ali, thank you for being on the show.
Mr. Shaw, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited. You guys have been growing so fast. You guys are one of the firms I've been watching, keeping an eye on the last couple of years, and really admiring. You guys have grown so much. I want to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, I want to talk about the Who Hurt You campaign. I think that's just such a brilliant campaign. You know, personal injury is one of those things where you've seen so many billboards and so many advertisements. You feel like every catchphrase has already been taken. And the Who Hurt You campaign is just so brilliant. I can't believe that hadn't already been used. Did you feel that way when you came up with that?
I was surprised when I saw Who Hurt You, and it was suggested to me, and then we ran with it. We went to get the domain name, and the domain name cheap. It was so cheap. I was like, nobody wants this domain name, whohurtyou.com. So it was like pennies on the dollar.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to get more into the launching of an advertising campaign because I think that's something that a lot of people are curious about how to do that properly and don't really know. And I think you're one of the few firms that have executed it really well. But I want to start at the beginning. So you started your practice back in 2016. How long had you been an attorney before you started your practice?
I was an attorney for less than 6 months before I started my practice.
Wow. Did you always know you wanted to start your practice?
The short of it, yes. My dad's businessman. He got his MBA. His father was an attorney. And so, I mean, since I was 6 years old, he always told me, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a lawyer. And he's always worked for himself. I have 3 older sisters. They all work for themselves. And so it was just something that I knew I was going to eventually do. I just didn't know I'd do it this quickly.
Yeah. I mean, so you were kind of like bred for it. Were the conversations around the dinner table about, running your own business, how to deal with hiring, I mean, what was that like growing up around somebody who'd been a successful business owner?
Most of the dinners were basically, you're going to work for yourself. You're going to work for yourself. That's where you're really going to meet success because being an employee is great and it's actually really good for certain people. But if you're looking to scale, for example, and take it to the next level, you have to do something for yourself. And so what was challenging for me is nobody was a lawyer in my family. So scaling and growing and starting a law firm was completely different than starting a copy service or any type of call center or whatever, anything other than a law firm.
No, that's exactly right. One thing you touched on, I want to harp on is it isn't for everybody, right? We have business owners on this podcast that talk about running their firm. I ran my own firm for a bit. Obviously, I run Esquire Tech, but it's not for everybody. And there's a lot of people I look at that work in very successful jobs. And I'm like, man, I'm kind of jealous of that person. They have none of the stress. They make plenty of money and they don't have to deal with the nonsense that we got to deal with. You ever feel that way?
Absolutely. They get to just wear one hat all day and they get really good at wearing that hat.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But that's not for me though.
Right.
Unfortunately. Right. And I wish it was for me because it's a lot easier just wearing one hat sometimes and not wearing 50 hats and trying to be good at it every time you wear that hat.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because wearing 50 hats is 50 opportunities for a mistake. And so, but you have to be competent in every single one of those areas, whether it's accounting, finance, marketing, sales, being a lawyer, managing deadlines. You have to be competent in every single one. Because unless you're going to go out and find really good talent in every single department, which is hard to do when you start off because you don't have money to pay that kind of talent. And so, how did you learn to become good in those kinds of different categories?
Yeah, I didn't have money. That's how I became good at it.
No choice.
Because I see it. I mean, there's a lot of law firms that started at the same time as me, and they came in with capital. They came in with investors. And they're crushing it right now, but they had a different experience than me because when you start and you have fuel, right, then you can hire those high-level employees, those A students, and have a corporation, a conglomerate, an entity from day one, as opposed to learning how to wear those 50 hats by yourself for the first couple of years. And then once you get the ball rolling, then you can start delegating this piece and then delegating that piece until ultimately you have a corporation that person had on probably day one.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So you launch your firm 6 months as a lawyer. It's just you, right? Did you start off with anybody or you just you?
I started off with just me. I mean, I pitched the idea to a couple people. It's pretty scary to go out on your own, especially when you don't know the law very well. And you know, you're gonna promote yourself for legal services. Like, who the hell is gonna hire you when
Right.
you don't even know what's going on? So, I was a little bit nervous. I asked a couple people, "Hey, do you want to come out with me? Let's do this." I was excited about it, and they're like, "Buddy, you have no idea what's going on right now."
That's exactly right, Ali. I mean, when I started my practice, that is the big question, right? It's like, how do you differentiate yourself from everybody else in the market? You know, you throw a rock, you hit 10 personal injury lawyers. How do you get a client to trust you? And how do you find that niche for yourself where it's going to make sense for the client and for yourself? And so, how did you differentiate yourself in the beginning?
I got super lucky. I mean, I'm so grateful for the law firm that I worked at. The few months that I worked for a personal injury law firm, they're a behemoth in our industry, and I got an opportunity early on to be an intake post bar law clerk and then an intake attorney. So uh, they did high volume. I was probably evaluating close to 200 cases a month. So I'm doing 200 consultations a month. I'm the one that's meeting up with a lot of these clients face to face. I'm going to the hospital. Granted, their families inviting us to go to the hospital. We
Yeah,
weren't going on our own.
of
So
course.
they'd invite us. We'd go to the hospital. It would be me with a family, and someone's in a coma, someone just died. And so I learned uh, how to communicate with a grieving family and being that counsel that they need. And so picking up that skill set, I was like, I could do this for myself eventually. And I didn't have the legal skill set at the time, but I knew how to counsel and advocate for a client early on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a big thing. A lot of these clients, you know, they're just looking for a partner or they're looking for somebody to help them figure out what to do next. They're not worried about what's your trial strategy. They're worried about what do I do tomorrow? How do I get through this? And being empathetic, being, you know, sympathetic to the clients, caring about the clients, saying, "Okay, let me help you through all aspects of this situation, and then I'm also going to deal with the legal side for you," is a balance I think sometimes some attorneys miss. They worry a lot about, "Hey, how am I going to, you know, put this into a demand letter tomorrow, or how am I going to, you know, structure the complaint?" It's like, okay, we'll get there, but let's focus on the client for a second, right?
Yeah, there's that human factor element that I think a lot of attorneys are missing. And to go back to your question, separating yourself, I saw some of these very successful attorneys. They all had a tagline. They had something that got them in the door that separated themselves. So, I mean, I went through a whole bunch of things before I got the "Who Hurt You" tagline. But I remember I used to put out ads for free on Craigslist called "Affordable Attorney."
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I got any business from that. I mean, I'm not sure if people want affordable attorney. I don't know if that
Right,
sounds
right,
attractive,
right.
but I did that, and then we did "Let Your Voice Be Heard," and I still stand for that because uh, one thing that I learned in law school when I was on the negotiation team is you're learning a skill set to communicate, and not everybody has that communication skill, and so uh, you're standing and stepping into the shoes of somebody else and speaking on their behalf, and so not everybody has a voice, and they've been wronged, and a lot of people, they're shy and they've been wronged and they just stay quiet for the rest of their lives. So you kind of become a mouthpiece for them, and that's kind of the slogan that initially took off for us is "Let your voice be heard."
And so did you just, as you started 6 months in as a lawyer and you launched your firm and okay, this is Razavi Law Group, did you just go out and try these different taglines from affordable attorney to let your voice be heard and eventually landing on who hurt you? Or how did that work?
Yeah, so different different avenues. I did different taglines. Like I did "Affordable Attorney" on Craigslist because I just thought that would be the demographic for Craigslist.
Yep.
And I can't say I did get some cases that probably weren't great cases, but I got some business out of it.
Yeah.
And then "Let Your Voice Be Heard" was something I stand for and I still stand for today, and we still use it. But kind of going back to the dinners that I would have with my family, I think the most important thing that they always told me is marketing.
Mm.
Marketing is so important for any business. It doesn't matter what you do, who you are. Marketing is so important. So figure that part out. So 6 months into this, I was already advertising. I was already marketing, and it's scary to not feel super confident in your legal skill set. I'll put
Yeah.
it that way, and your advertising in the world. Luckily, I had a very strong network of senior trial attorneys and attorneys that I could turn to and speak to, and I was probably pretty annoying to them
Yeah.
because you know it's like, hey, buddy, go work for somebody if you're going to keep calling me for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're the ones that walked me through this in the very beginning, the very first year or whatnot.
Well, there's two things I want to touch on. One being the marketing, right? So I think that a lot of lawyers shy away from marketing or advertising, or they kind of look down on advertisers or marketers because they have this big misconception that, oh, if I'm just a great attorney, word will spread on its own. And I think that's lawyers being lawyers and not being business owners, because every business, Apple has a great product and they market like crazy. So why can't you market if you have a good product, right?
Absolutely. I mean, same thing with McDonald's. Like, we still see advertisements for McDonald's. We all know who McDonald's is, the Golden Arches, but they're still advertising because you're almost as good as your last advertisement. You're only
Mhm.
as good as your last case. And I do, I think there's merit in the attorneys that say, hey, I'm damn good at what I do and people are going to hear about me. That's absolutely true. But it depends on how quickly you want to scale.
Mm.
And I think that's when advertising and marketing comes in. It's just going to get you to where you're going to go quicker.
Yeah, the question is, what's your vision for your firm, right? If you want to be a trial lawyer that handles 10, 15 cases at a time, nothing more than that, and that's what you want to do, then you don't need to, don't worry about advertising, just worry about getting great trial results. But if you want to build a business, a larger firm and volume, and not even just massive volume, but if you just want more and more clients, you're not going to be able to do that without some form of marketing and advertising.
Absolutely. And for me, I think I like to surprise people, and I know there's the misconception that if you're on billboards, if you're advertising, you're not doing legal work. That's why I litigate cases myself. I've tried cases myself, just because I feel good about it. I feel good that I'm becoming a better lawyer, and I can tell clients that, hey, I will try your case. I will try your case with my associate or co-counsel or somebody else at the firm, so they know that you're not just a face.
Right.
You're not just a pretty face, and you're actually going to roll up your sleeves and do the legal work. And you're knowledgeable in this industry. I've spent a lot of time in personal injury. In the limited time that I've been in it, I eat, sleep, and breathe personal injury. To be honest, I've been doing it for, I don't know, probably over 8 years. I've been doing it 7 years for myself,
Yeah.
and there isn't a whole lot of room for anything else, in your personal life. Like, I'm not married. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
This is everything to me.
No
But
hobbies? You don't
it's
make
got me
model
to.
trains or anything like that? No hobbies?
That's funny. Every time everyone asks me that, I have to think about it. I don't really know. It's like I've been going to school my whole life, and then I started a law practice.
Yeah.
Like, there's things that I like to do, but something that I consistently do as a hobby, it's kind of sad, but I don't think I have one yet.
You know,
Maybe
no,
maybe when I'm
don't. I'm,
retired.
I'm so glad you said that, because my friends give me trouble for it all the time. They're like, "Oh, what do you do for fun?" I'm like, "This is what I do for fun. Like, I don't have much else, and there's nothing else I would rather. If I have like 6 hours on a weekend to do something, then other than play with my kids, this is what I want to do, right? And that's what I want to work on. If my
Absolutely.
kids are in class or at school or they're at some camp, this is what I'm going to do. I don't. What else am I going to do? I don't want to sit around and watch TV. That sounds boring, you know. So I'm the same
Absolutely.
way.
Especially like, yeah, especially like my friends that they're like, let's go watch sports. And like, I'll watch a sports game here and there, but if you're going to spend 4 hours every single week watching sports, if not more, it's like you're watching them make money while you're just sitting on the couch. Like, how does that even make sense?
Yeah, how does that even make sense? The second question, going back to your earlier answer, you mentioned that you were lucky to have a network of senior trial lawyers and people you could lean on to learn the legal side of being a lawyer, right? But you also said that you didn't grow up with any lawyers in your family or anything like that. So how did you develop that network?
Yeah. So when I was in law school, I had an idea that eventually I wanted to do practice for myself. And as a law student, you're pretty, and to all the law students that are listening to this, I mean this the nicest way possible. But as a law student, there's not a whole lot you can provide a law firm or a lawyer. You just don't have the skill set yet. And if anything, when a law firm brings on a law clerk, the law firm's probably losing money because they're teaching the law clerk how to do things, right? So I knew I wasn't very valuable to lawyers, but what I ended up doing is I started this club at Chapman Law School called the Solo Practitioner Law Society, and it gave me an opportunity to network with lawyers and bring in the lawyers to talk about themselves and their story to the law students. And I learned something early on that lawyers like to talk about themselves. So I was able to bring in a bunch of lawyers and basically asked lawyers, how did you guys crush it so hard?
Right.
And that's how I initially started networking with lawyers as a law student. And these are a lot of people that I ended up staying in touch with. And then on top of that, you intern. It's so important as a law student to intern as much as possible, be a law clerk as much as possible, work as many places as much as possible. Some people say just work at one place, but I say work and meet as many lawyers as possible, because one of the first things I did when I started my own law firm is I looked at my resume and I contacted everybody that I ever worked for, and I met up with them again, and I saw. I asked them, like, is there any cases I can work on? Is there anything we can do together? Is there any value in me and you in a working relationship? And I was able to get cases like that early on as well.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, two things you mentioned that I want everybody to focus on. One is you went out and created a space for lawyers to spread their message. Instead of being a taker and saying, hey, what can you do for me? It's, hey, let me give you a space to talk about you. And I'm going to learn a lot from them talking, not from me talking. And that's important, right? I think a lot of law students and lawyers miss that moment of like, they get you in front of them, and then it's just a 30-second blast of why they're so smart and they're so special, as opposed to, hey, tell me about you and tell me what you've done. If I'm not listening, I'm not learning, right? And having that mindset is important. Number two is the follow-up. That's a big thing a lot of people don't do, is this follow-up of, okay, you came in, you said your piece. Now let me call you again and stay in touch. Stay in touch with people. How you doing? Hey, you mentioned that your practice was doing this. How's that case going? Just following up with people. And then number three is so those are, I think those are two important things you mentioned. But one of the things I want to tell everybody is you did it in law school, but you don't have to. If you didn't do it in law school, doesn't mean you can't do it now. Doesn't mean you
Right.
can't reach out to people now as a lawyer. Let's say you're a 5-year lawyer and you're thinking about breaking off and starting your own. We'll call people that have run their own practice and say, hey, you've clearly been successful. You got 30 minutes for a coffee. I'd love to hear your story, what you're doing. Some people may have it, some people may not. But if you make 100 calls, 10 people will say yes. And that's all you need.
Absolutely. It's a numbers game. And believe it or not, lawyers are willing to help. They're willing to help because they remember the struggle that they've gone through. And it's kind of like pay it forward type of situation. I've noticed for the most part, because you know how busy lawyers are, especially lawyers that are running their own practice, or even trial lawyers, they're so busy. But they'll carve out some time to help out somebody because somebody did that for them once upon a time.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a pay it forward type thing because, I had so many lawyers that, I didn't have any lawyers in my family, and I had lawyers that helped me a lot in the beginning. And there's not really much I can do to pay them back other than pay it forward, because there's nothing of value I can provide, right? Like when I was running my own practice, like, yeah, okay, maybe I had a case or something, you could bring them on, but that's not the situation anymore. So there's not much I can do to thank them other than, help strengthen the ladder for the next group of people. And that's important to do because we want this profession to be strong. We want the future lawyers to be strong. We don't want it to go away. And this is the way we can do it, is help. I want to switch gears a second. So you talk a lot about marketing in the early days and Craigslist and calling your old mentors or calling people you went to law school with or intern for. I agree with every single thing you said. But now I want to shift into hiring and scaling. You've had your practice 7 years and you have 30 employees. That's fast.
Yeah.
That's a lot of growth, man.
It honestly feels like yesterday, especially when I'm interviewing right now. We have a whole entire interviewing team, but when I was interviewing like last year, it's like, it feels like yesterday I was on the other side of that desk trying to get a job somewhere and nobody was hiring me, by the way. But it's crazy. It's crazy how life passes you. But I have to say that, yeah, it's a big step to want to go out on your own, but you got to get lucky too. I got super, super lucky. Nicole, if you're hearing this, I got super lucky with my very first hire, Nicole. She came in and I couldn't afford to pay her anything. I think I was paying her 7 years ago, probably like less than, I don't know, like $13, whatever. I mean, whatever minimum wage was at the time.
Yeah.
And she had walked away from a big girl job, a full-time job, to like, enter this delusion with me of like
Yeah.
me in this like little room and sharing a desk with her and me like pitching her. I'm like, hey, like we're gonna crush it one day.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, all right, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk away from everything I have going on to live this fantasy out with you. And she was my very first hire. Now she's our office manager after 7 years. I hired her after my first year, so I did everything myself the very first year. Kind of what I mentioned. You need to be able to wear all 50 hats. You have to have an idea of how to wear all 50 hats because once you start delegating, you can't control that anymore. You can't manage it anymore because assuming your employees, everyone's good, but there's no way to you quantify what they're doing. You can't put a KPI on what they're doing because you don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
right? It's as if I brought somebody that does computer science to protect our office for cybersecurity and IT. Like I just don't know the first thing about that. And they can tell me that this job is going to take 3 years, 14 hours a day. And I'll be like, all right, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
Right.
But when it's your own company, like you really got to know like the basic stuff, how things work, because then you can communicate, then you can make sure that things get better and you can make things more efficient and make the systems easier. But hiring that first person is so important. And I can't stress that enough because I've had a handful of other attorneys that started at the same time as me and their first hire wasn't good. And their second hire wasn't good and the third hire wasn't good. And they keep going through this revolving door of bad hires. And when I say a bad hire, they're just not a good fit for each other. And so when you have that very first solid hire, it's easier to build a foundation around that. So I have a lot to thank Nicole for. I hope she's with me forever. But because of her, I was able to hire that next person and then the next attorney and then kind of grow from there because we were solid together.
Yeah, and it's also inspiring. Like when you hired somebody and it worked out, you're like, "Oh, this is awesome! Let's do this again." Right? But when you hire somebody and it doesn't work out, you're like, "I never want to do that again." And so it's nice to start off the bat, to get this person that's a good fit. But what you said, I agree with, which is it's not that the person is bad or the person is good. It's that they have to be a fit for what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And if that isn't aligned, then it's never going to work out, regardless of hours put in or work ethic or any of that stuff, because the vision isn't aligned. And so it sounds like you did a good job communicating your vision to Nicole, letting her know, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is what I want to do. And if you want to be a part of this, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be fast. It's going to be busy. I bet she had to wear multiple hats too if she's your only employee.
Multiple hats. Like bless her heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, she took a big leap of faith with me, and I can't stress that enough. Like when you have that first solid person, it's like having that first solid brick of a building. Like then you can add on to that because as one person, you can only go so far. You could be the best freaking lawyer ever, but you only got 24 hours in the day. And let's just say you don't eat and you don't sleep.
Right.
You're still limited to 24 hours a day. There's only so much work you could take. There's only so much productivity you can take. But when you have a teammate, then you're like, okay, can you handle this while I handle this stuff? And then you're right. When that works out, you're like, okay, that was good. Let me hire my next person and give them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And now you're able to properly advertise and market and not do bad legal work, I guess. I think that's the biggest fear is when you're advertising and marketing, you're getting the business. It's like, what am I going to do with the business? So it's really important. Like as much as I say it's important to advertise and market, you have to provide good legal service because if you do a bad job for Phil, Bob, and Joe, like I don't care like how many advertisements you have, like no one's going to call you back. You're going to have a bad name in the street. And that's the worst thing that you can do. Like you need to be able to handle the work that's coming in. And so you need a team to handle that.
That's exactly right. Did you have a structure in place where you're like, okay, this many cases? I think I know your answer to this because it's every business owner's same answer, but I think a misconception out there for people that have never run a business is, oh, people that run their business, they had a whole plan in place and they had like a structure of, oh, when I do this, then I do this. And when I get 30 cases, then I hire somebody else. Did you have a structure in that? Or was it like, we're just going to figure it out as it comes in?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to this. We're going to figure it out as it comes in. And I think personal injury is a very, very interesting, novel industry in the sense that you have ebbs and flows, right? It's feast or famine. When you get busy, an army can't help you out. I mean, you need an entire city to back you up. Uh, but then you could have a slow time too, and everyone's just like twiddling their thumbs, right?
Yeah.
So it's that balancing act where, okay, when we do get super busy, we need all the manpower possible. But then when there's nothing going on, when you know what I mean by nothing going on, it's
Yeah.
just you don't have trials, you don't have crazy deadlines. You don't want to be paying for this huge overhead for everyone just to kick it and tell jokes all day, which I really care about company morale
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that type of atmosphere, but it just doesn't make sense as a business owner.
Well, I mean, it's clear company morale and culture, and I want to talk a little bit about that because if you have somebody that's a great employee, like a Nicole, that comes in and starts working for you, you go through these growing pains together, and she's still there 7 years later. I mean, clearly you're doing something right as a boss and a business owner. I mean, what do you think has helped you keep some of these key employees? And I'm sure Nicole isn't the only one, but what do you think has helped you as a business owner and a boss keep these key employees, keep them happy, keep them motivated?
Yeah, I think transparency is really important. I know a lot of business owners, they'll keep their staff in the dark. They'll keep them in the dark with how the company's doing, finances. And I'm not saying just like open your books to the whole world, but
Right.
for them, because they're dedicating their lives to you to build out your dream. Like you need to understand that. You need to understand that people are dedicating their time to build out your dream and what you have envisioned. And so I think it's important to kind of clue them in on company's health and the transparency of that. And I always tell my staff we do Monday morning meetings every Monday. Just I give them a motivational speech, something that inspired me over the weekend, and I try to get them going for the week. But I think being an owner of a company, especially being an owner of a law firm, it's really easy to be successful. It's really easy to be rich. The real flex is when your employee and your staff is rich, and
Mm.
that's what I'm trying to work towards. Like I want their success because it's hand in hand. Just like when my clients make more money, I make more money. When my staff makes more money, I want to make more money, and that's kind of how I've built the law firm out so that as we grow, they're growing, and it helps me grow, so we're all growing together. And I think when I implement that constant growth and like, hey, let's be better than yesterday. Let's make more money than yesterday. Let's all move towards our goal. That's what's keeping people engaged because if you don't give, and it's little things, if you don't give your staff more vacation time, or if you don't give them raises every year if they deserve it, why would they stay? And I could be the coolest boss ever, right?
Right.
But why would they stay? Like at the end of the day, people have lives that they need to move on. They got bills that they got to pay for. So people like growth, people like job security, and that's what I try to promote in my company. It's like, hey, stick with me. Like every year, we've either doubled in size or we've grown. Like I've never retracted, luckily, knock on wood. And
Right.
you never know what life's going to be like, but
Yeah.
so far it's been like that. And so when they see that and they see how dedicated I am to that practice, and I'm leading the ship here, I think that's what keeps them involved in the firm and makes them not want to leave.
Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit on that because how do you structure that? When I hired my first employee at my law firm, I was deathly afraid. I went like a year and a half or almost 2 years on my own, and before I hired somebody, and I was deathly afraid that like, hey, if these cases don't settle 6 months, I might not make payroll. I kind of so. The scary part of the personal injury practice is you sign these cases, you're working on the cases, but you don't really know when they're gonna settle. You can have a pipeline and you can get a feel for an estimate, but you don't really know. So, how do you structure incentives or pay increases and things like that while kind of looking at your projections? How do you kind of put all those together and say, okay, I anticipate this much money coming in and I can afford to give this much more money, but I just don't really know when it's actually going to come in?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think that's $1 million question.
Yeah.
Some of the KPIs that I look at, for example, is you need to run your business off of your low level cases. You
Mm.
can't run your business off of your 7-figure cases. Those are the cherry on the sundae. So don't calculate that when you're thinking about giving raises and bonuses and your annual income. Like I'm running a business off of my run of the mill cases, if there is a run of the mill cases. But
Yeah.
that's what I'm running my business off of. Any big case is a cherry on top. So I know that there's going to be bonuses like money being injected into the company, throughout the year, periodically. That's one thing. I think that you need to walk before you run. So I didn't wake up with 30 employees. 30 employees has been a product of 7 years. And so as the firm has been growing, I've been adding team members as the company has needed it. I've never in small circumstances, I've never like overstaffed my company. I've
That's a
always
question I
just
was going to ask. Yeah, is it proactive
yeah,
hiring or reactive hiring?
I want to say it's proactive, but because when I think about reactive, it's like you're in the red, you're screwed, and you're scrambling to hire somebody. It's too late at that point because now your quality of legal work has dropped. So you have to, as the business owner, your finger has to be on the pulse. Like you could either be coming to the office every day. You know, I wear a suit. I make my entire staff wear a suit. So either I come to the office every day wearing a suit, or I could be in the Bahamas. I could afford to be in the Bahamas the entire year, right? And I'll have no idea what's going on, and I won't be able to anticipate the direction of the firm going. And I think that's the job of the owner is to anticipate what's going to happen next. And you might not always be right, but when you have your finger on the pulse, you'll have an idea of like, hey, we're getting more cases now. I don't think the case managers and the attorneys are going to be able to handle this volume 3 months in a row. Let's start hiring because right now no one said anything, but I can anticipate 90 days from now everyone's going to be up to their ears and they're not going to be able to handle this anymore, right? So you start looking to hire 2 months in the rear, so 2 months in advance. So in 2 months you'll have somebody. That's probably how I would do it, as opposed to like everyone's up to here, everyone's mad at the owner, and you're like, I got to hire the next person because then if you're not vetting the next person, like you're trying to build a culture here too. Like you want to vet people and see if they're a good fit for you, you're a good fit for them. And when you're under the gun, and this has happened in the past, you're going to hire somebody that's not a good fit. You're going to train them for 6 weeks, and then it's just not going to work out, and that's going to throw you back even further.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But there's times where even when you plan 60 days ahead, right? Everybody makes mistakes on hiring. Nobody has a perfect hiring process. You hire somebody, you get them trained, you get them ramped up. Maybe they're competent at their job, but they're a problem in the culture or in the environment. I mean, we've all had that where we've had that one person to come in and they're just causing all the drama. What's your kind of thesis or theory when you realize this quickly and you're like, I got to do something? And then what do you do?
The quickest way to lose good talent is keeping bad talent. That's what it is. And so I'd rather have a B or C employee that I could work with and I trust than the A employee that's causing problems throughout every department and spreading like cancer. So that's kind of how I would look at it. Everybody wants that high level employee that's just crushing it and out producing everybody. But if they're causing more harm to the rest of the firm, right? The firm has to come number one as opposed to any employee. So if they're causing more harm to the firm, you're going to start losing those B and C employees, and you're going to basically crash because now you have one A employee and you've lost six B and C employees, right?
Right.
So I early on we do like 90-day probationary period. It's kind of like the dating phase, right?
Yeah.
Like either it's you have an idea it's going to work or it's not, and sometimes it doesn't work and you just like you read it wrong, right? Like your flirting
Yeah.
game sucks, like you have
Yeah.
no idea what
Yeah.
just happened.
Yeah.
You got fooled. But for the most part, it's like after 90 days, like we kind of got a vibe of each other and like, yeah, we can make this work. You might not be my ideal person, I might not be your ideal person, but we can make this work. Like I can meet you somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just like, we're so far off, like we don't see things the same way, and you've caused so much trouble. And it's easier because I do a little bit of very little employment law. For any business owner, and I'm not giving legal advice here, but at 90 days, there isn't really an expectation that the employee is going to have their job forever. At the 90-day period, you should pull the cord if you have any funky feelings and you don't think they're a good fit. It's going to be easier for you to kind of walk away.
But you feel bad as a human, right? Because like you're like, I feel bad if I hire somebody and like I know they're not going to work out and I know I got to do what's best for the business, but either they left their job to come over here, especially if I recruited them. Oh my God, I feel so terrible when I recruit somebody and then I realize like, oh, 90 day, I'm like, this is not a good fit. And then I'm like, oh man, I'm a horrible human being. And so, I mean, but what can you do? You have no choice but to pull it because you're like, this is just not going to work. They're not going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy. And it just is what it is, I'm sure you've had that happen.
Totally. It's tough, and I think the way that we try to counteract that is like in your job post, like just be super transparent. Like there's a time to be salesy,
Yeah.
but like in a job post, be super transparent because that will come back and bite you. Absolutely. Like that's just like you promised me X, Y, and Z, and like none of this is happening. So you want to be super transparent in your job post. So like everyone's on the same page. It's in writing. So if it ends up like not working out, you didn't misrepresent or misguide anything like that. Because you're right. At the end of the day, someone is coming to somebody's coming to work for you for their livelihood, right? Like they got bills that they gotta pay, and if you uproot them from their job and you actually like you went out looking for them, right? You scouted them, you brought them over, they left their other job and it doesn't work out. Yeah, I'd feel bad too because it's like they had something going on, but the goal was for you guys to work together, right? Just like any relationship you get in, like you don't get in a relationship to like just get divorced, right? Like you're hoping that this thing takes off, right? And if it doesn't take off, like maybe the divorce is the best bet, but you're going in there with good intentions, and it's tough. It's a tough conversation to have to be like, hey, I love you, but this isn't a good fit, and I don't think we're a good fit for each other. And they're like, whoa. I got like kids. I got stuff to pay for. Like, what do you mean this isn't a good fit?
I know. I've always, anytime we've had to let somebody go, and a lot of times it isn't because they were bad at their job. Sometimes it was, but a lot of times it's because it just wasn't a good fit, like you said, right? Like I didn't see a future with this person. It's such a good analogy, the relationship thing, right? And I've always tried to help them find a place as much as I could, right? I don't want to recommend bad people. So, I wouldn't do it if I thought the person was, completely incompetent. But if I felt like it was a personality thing or it was like some unwork related reasons, I'd be like, listen, let me try to find you something, because if I can reach out to my network. I'm happy to do it. But yeah, it's hard. It's probably the worst part of running a business is just letting people go, because you just feel terrible that they took a shot on you and you took a shot on them and it didn't work out. But I mean, if you have no feelings about firing people, then you're not really, I can't imagine you're a human and care about anybody. You know what I mean? It's so rough, but it is what it is. It's part of what you sign up for when you decide to be a business owner. The other things you sign up for are taking risks on marketing campaigns, right? I want to dive into the Who Hurt You campaign. When you decided to launch that, I felt like it kind of just came out of, I wouldn't say nowhere, but it came out all at once is the word I want to go with, right? Like I started seeing it on, billboards. I started seeing it on bus stops. I felt like I was seeing it on social media, and it felt like it all launched at once. Is that something you launched all at once, or was it slowly?
That was something that we basically launched all at once. It wasn't coincidental. I mean, we're building up, for the last 6-7 years, building up an ad budget, and we've been advertising throughout this entire, 6, 7, 8 years. But you start accumulating more money, right? And you can either go live in the Bahamas, or you can inject it back into the company, because you want to be a household name. I mean, that's what I want to be. I want to be a household name. I want to do good legal work, and I want everybody to know me as the firm that does great legal work. So when we came up with Who Hurt You, we're like, let's go all on black. And every year I put everything on black on the law firm. And for me, it's like either it hits and it's gonna be the best story ever, or I had a fun run. Like it was awesome and we had a great time. And that's kind of what keeps me in it. It's fun for me because I'm not afraid to lose it all, which sounds so crazy because who wouldn't be afraid to lose all this? But that's what's kept me competitive. That's what's helped me grow every year, is having that mentality, coming from a place of abundance, not a place of lack. It's like, hey, I believe in what I'm doing and I'm putting it all in black. And if it hits, it's going to be awesome. If it doesn't, like, I'm not going to regret this at all because this was freaking awesome. Like, I had such a fun run doing this. But when the Who Hurt You campaign came out, uh, it was it couldn't have came out at a better time because no one was using Who Hurt You. People were talking about Who Hurt You. It was like a common thing. It's like if you're upset, it's like, yo, like who hurt you?
Yeah,
dude?
yeah.
And so I was like, no one's using it, and we hold ourselves out as the modern lawyers. We're a little bit younger, and so Gen Z, millennials. I was like, this is my new demographic. Like this is the demographic. For a personal injury attorney, everyone's your demographic, right? You have a baby in the womb, and you have 100-year-old person that I don't know, like they got hit by a car, right? Like you'll take anything, assuming it's in the right jurisdiction. But I think focusing on a certain demographic and getting your message across to a certain demographic, I think that's really important. And I realized that Gen Z and millennials, like that's my demographic, and they're going to be here for quite some time. And so like I wanted to get my message across to them. And I was looking at advertisements at the time, and all these billboards were like best accident attorney, like award winning, like
Yeah.
super lawyers 15 years in a row, like 400 billion million jillion dollars recovered in the last 5 minutes. It's like, yo, that's a lot when I'm like driving and I'm reading all that, and they all had the same one. It was just like, the reason is billboards are extremely expensive. Like anyone will tell you, billboards are extremely expensive. So when you want to get your bang for your buck, and like you want to get as much info on that billboard as possible, and I was like, okay, or I could do the exact opposite, like simplicity, minimalist, and I'm just gonna write "Who hurt you," and I'm gonna have my picture, and they're gonna find me if they find me. Basically,
Yeah.
like I don't know. Initially, I might have had a email address or a website or maybe a phone number, like if that. Some of them just say "Who hurt you" on it. It's like either you know or you don't know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I like that because it was.
no,
Go
go
on.
ahead, please. Go ahead.
Oh no, I like that because it was different. It was something that I didn't see other lawyers do, and not to say like we're an industry leader, but now I see a lot more law firms have like these simplistic, funny, like modern billboard taglines.
Yeah, no, it's true. You know, you mentioned about billboards being expensive, and I've never advertised on billboards. It was just not something that was in my budget as a law firm owner or a business owner. But I always felt like it's hard to track ROI from something like that. Do you look at it as just a branding play that people recognize the brand, or is it something that you're tracking? Like digital ads, easy to track ROI. You can track where they
Sure.
click, you know, where they came from, the pixels and all that stuff. You can't do that with a billboard. So, what's been your strategy on knowing that you're getting your money's worth?
There's different techniques you can use. Like you can use a different phone number per billboard. Like I don't necessarily do that on all of them, but you have to ask first. You have to ask every customer, where did you find me? Because you got to know where you're putting your marketing dollars. A lot of times they don't know where they saw you. You get a handful of people that says, yeah, I saw you on the freeway on the 405, or I saw you here. It's gonna be rare. It's rare to have somebody be like, I saw you on the billboard. It happens, absolutely. Like you get cases that way, but your cost per acquisition is like through the
Yeah,
roof if you're
yeah.
just looking at that. What I think it is, it's yeah, number one, branding, like you mentioned. Number two, they see your billboard, right? They see your billboard, they see your billboard, they see your sign, and then if you have good SEO, if you have a good online presence, now when they're searching for an attorney, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen that dude on the red sign. I trust him. I've seen him, and there's some type of relationship when you never even met this person before. Um, so it helps convert leads as opposed to having somebody find you off of a billboard. It helps you convert all of your other marketing avenues, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. It's that you're not an unfamiliar link, right? If they type you into Google, if they type in personal injury lawyer into Google, they're going to see 15 links that basically look the same. And if they recognize one of the names, they may not even remember where they recognized it from, right? They don't know if their friend told them. They don't know if they saw a TV commercial. They don't know if it was a billboard, but they recognize one of the links and they go, "That sounds familiar. Let me just go with that person or click on that person." So it's kind
Yeah,
of just planting the seed of like, hey, we exist in the community. Also letting my dad's not a business. My parents were not business owners, but I remember when my dad would go through the newspaper, he'd be like, "Oh, this person's legit. Look at their big ad." And like now as a business owner, I'm like, Dad, they just paid for that. Like that doesn't mean they're legit, but you know, that's how people think. That's how the normal consumer thinks is that, well, hey, if they're out there and they're able to put their name on a big billboard and then be here and then be on TV and be on all these places, they must be legit. And that's because the layperson does not know who's a good lawyer, who's not a good lawyer, unless like they have a friend who used a lawyer before. They might use the recommended person, but it's more like planning that recognition, whether it's brand recognition or whether it's your firm recognition, whatever you want to call it. But it's that familiarity where they go, that sounds familiar. I want to go with what I know, and they feel like they already know you.
absolutely. And I think there's a psychological aspect. Being on that big billboard, there's a sense of like financial power.
Mm,
this lawyer's willing to spend money, basically,
They got
and he's willing to
resources.
spend money on my case.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I've done a lot of intakes, and sometimes I hear, are you just by yourself, or do you have other lawyers at your firm? It's like, well, I'm thinking in my head, like, why does that matter? You're talking to the owner of the firm right now. Like,
Yeah.
why is that even important? But there's this misconception that's like, more is better, right? And so more resources is better. And so I think there's that psychological aspect of it too. It's like these guys are down to drop money, and they're down to drop money on my case. Now the flip side is these guys are dropping all their money on the billboards, and they can't drop any money on my case. But then you go to someone's reviews and you see what their reviews say, and I think that'll solidify if they're a good firm or not.
But you can't be everything to everybody, right? If for the clients, you mentioned earlier about picking your demographic. You're right. As a personal injury lawyer, everybody's our demographic, right? Because anybody can get into a situation where they need our help. But from a business owner marketing perspective, you got to pick a zone and say, okay, that's the zone I'm going to play in. And the people that need me in that zone is who I'm going for. And so similarly, there are people that will never call somebody on a billboard, because they have a mentality that the person on the billboard is not a good lawyer. That's what they think, right? And so they won't. But then that's not your zone. And that's fine. You can't sign up everybody. And you don't need everybody. The pie is so big, you just need your little section. And so just commit to your section and say, I'm just going to dominate my section of people that are willing to hire me and willing to consider me, and everybody else can have everybody else, type of thing.
Absolutely. And you said it so simply, but I think that's easier said than done. I think when you have a brand, when you have a company, you want to be loved by everybody. You want to please everybody. And the sooner you realize, like, you can't please everybody, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea or shot of whiskey or what you want to call it.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a hard reality for some people to accept. I mean, it was hard for me to accept, especially the more you advertise. You have like the keyboard warriors and like the online trolls on TikTok, and they say what they say, and like at first it's like, yeah, that kind of hurts. Like they just said I sound stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't sound like a lawyer.
Yeah.
So like it kind of hurts your feelings. But now, like, what I look at is, when I get negative feedback on some of my advertisement, it's like, okay, I officially have reached the masses, because you can't please everybody. And if everybody's just promoting you and saying, awesome job, awesome job, awesome job, you're not hitting the masses anymore. So I look at it differently now.
That's 100% right. It's like what they say about trials, right? If you've never lost a trial, you haven't done enough trials, right? That's just, there's nobody that bats 1,000%. There's nobody that bats 1,000% on marketing, right? And it's like the only people that, if I'm not a big social media guy, but when I get all positive comments, I'm like, it's all my friends, right? If you're out in the public, exactly, you're going to get negative comments. It's okay. You just got to deal with it, right? Another thing you mentioned is about customer acquisition costs. You said your customer acquisition cost is extremely high, obviously on billboards, because it's hard to track if you're only going to give the attribution to the billboard. If you're only going to give the attribution to the billboard, if somebody says billboard on the phone, your customer acquisition cost is going to be high. Now, that's a hard data point to track as a personal injury lawyer, because you could get one case that settles for $6 million and your customer acquisition cost is almost nothing, because you're like, oh, we got this one case. So how do you manage tracking, hey, volume average versus just straight revenue that came from this source?
Yeah. So, I mean, you have to have a case management software, especially if you have more than 10 clients. Like, you got to get a case management software to keep track of all of this. And so you're going to have some very high cost per acquisition, right? And then you're going to have $0, and nothing $0, but like you're going to have a returning client, you're going to have a former client's friend, you're going to have a family member, right? So you have that as probably close to nothing for cost per acquisition. And then you might have $20,000 for that one billboard on Sunset that only got one case for you, right? Yeah. So then you got to average those out and see, okay, what makes sense. Now, you might say, okay, we'll just cut out billboards and like, let's just live off of this former client and referral business. But I don't think you can scale a business off of referrals, because that's such a variable every single month. Like, you don't know if your network is going to get in an accident. Like, you have to constantly be looking for more people while you have your network at the same time. And also, I think it's easier for you to close because even though they're a former client or returning client, they don't owe you anything. Like, they only are coming back to you because you were good to them, right? But if they find somebody else that they think is going to be better, they're going to go with them, and like no hard feelings. That's life. So I think when you do have all these advertisements out, it's an easier sell for you to get your former returning clients, friend referrals, things like that. So that's how I think they play into it. Because like if you're to just look at billboards, like everybody would be doing billboards,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Like I mean, if you can afford it, you'd be doing billboards. But the reason why you don't do it is because it's really expensive, and you got to do it for quite some time before you get any ROI on it.
Yeah, and I'm using, I keep referring to the billboards, but I kind of am using that as a generic term for any kind of like mass advertising, because I think that that's whether it's TV or billboards or bus ads or whatever it may be, I think it's kind of the same concept for all of those
Mm-hmm.
kind of channels. Now you lead me perfectly into my next question, which is, how long do you run a campaign, and how much do you like budget for a campaign before you decide whether it's successful or not? So like when you launched the Who Hurt You campaign with all of the channels that you're doing it with, do you define success at the beginning and say, hey, look, here's how, if we get XYZ, we'll know that this was a successful campaign in this time frame? Or how did you kind of do that?
So it's a really good question because I never had done it before. So this is like uncharted territory for me, especially we're a newer law firm when you consider like all the law firms out there. And I just remember hearing any type of mass media, you got to do it for at least 1 year. You got to do it at least 1 year to see if it's going to hit or not. Because you can't do mass media for 1 month. Like right when people like, it takes a while for people to notice you in the first place. And then once they notice you, you're just gone. Like
Yeah.
that was a waste of money.
Yeah.
So you gotta be able to come back every month batting and miss for 12 months. For us, it was about 14 months of you're spending all this money. And I think what's healthy is about, this might be high, might be low, but I think 20% of your income should go to marketing. I think that's fair. Some people might say more, some people might say I'm crazy,
Yeah.
but I think that's a healthy number. Now, it was about, and it's tough, like say 12, 13 months, a year into this campaign where you're just like bleeding out money.
Yeah.
And you're not really doing anything else. You're not doing anything special. Like people might be like, hey, like seeing you around town, you're like, cool. Like I really appreciate that. Yeah, like would you hire me if like something happened to you? Yeah. And that's awesome. That's awesome that people notice you and people go out of their way to say that hello and let you know that you're being seen. I think that's really important. But at the end of the day, you're also running a business. You're like, well, am I making the right decision? I'm bleeding out money into this campaign, but it was about 14 months into the campaign where like we just saw an influx of business. And so again, it's that balancing act, right? It's the balancing act of marketing and also doing good legal service, because you can't just market.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Marketing's not enough, and not being good attorneys.
Yeah.
You're going to get a bad name. It's just that's how anything is. If you give really crappy haircuts, but you're on like every bus stop, like
Right.
people are going to be like, nah, I'm not going to go to him next time. I'm going to have my mom cut my hair.
Right.
So
and she's not on any billboards. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So that's kind of how I see it.
No, 100% agree with you. I mean, one of my, I'd never run a business before I started my law firm. And one of the early on books that I read was a book called The E-Myth Revisited, which I thought was a good book. I don't know if you ever read it, but they talk about like there's three parts to the business. There's the entrepreneur side, which is the marketing and going on, getting more business. There's the operational side, which is like managing your payroll and your HR and all that stuff. And then there's the actual technician. And the analogy he used in the book is like a baker, right? It's like you need somebody that actually knows how to bake a cake properly. If they don't know how to bake a cake, I don't care if you got the other two doing well, you're not going to survive as a business. And so that's the third part of what we're talking about here is, we talked about hiring and scaling and getting more employees and keeping them happy. We talked about marketing, getting more business. And, I don't want to keep you too long, but while we have a couple more minutes, how do you also scale good legal services? Because that's hard to do, right? You've got a lot going on. Hey, I got to watch this marketing, making sure I'm not going over budget, making sure I'm getting ROI here. I got to make sure my staff is happy. They're scaling up in their life the way I want them to scale. At the same time, I want to make sure that the quality of legal services doesn't dip. What systems or processes have you put in place to make sure that doesn't happen?
Sure. There's an expectation, obviously, as an attorney, like you do continued legal education. So obviously you have that side of it. But what I really push on my law firm, especially the attorneys, is seminars, just webinars, seminars, because when you just like eat, breathe, and sleep personal injury, like you feel like you know everything, but then like some weird set of facts come up, and then like somebody will do a webinar on that weird set of facts, and lo and behold, like you'll see that weird set of facts in your caseload sooner than you'd imagine. And you know, in law, in life, you know what you don't know, and then there's this third part of you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it's really important to kind of explore that I don't know what I don't know by continuing learning. And so another thing that I do is with the attorneys, we all have weekly meetings, and we go over. I mean, we have too many cases to go over in one sitting, but we go over all the weird stuff that we came across that week. Something that was just novel, or like how do you approach this, what would you do here. And everybody has a different legal experience now, right? Like when you're doing decent volume and you've handled so many types of fact patterns, like this person might have an idea, this person might have an idea. And what I like about law and personal injury, there's multiple ways to skin a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's multiple ways to get from point A to point B. Now there might be a more efficient way to do it, but there's multiple ways to do it, and it's fun to explore those sides and talk about it. And so that I think is really important on that side. And then the way that we hire, we basically hire Chapman law students. We hire Chapman law students, and while they're in law school, we get them prepped and understanding personal injury. So when they become attorneys, they can hit the ground running at our firm. Like all of our lawyers are Chapman graduates, and part of that is because I went to Chapman Law, and I want to give back. I remember when I first started, it was tough to get a job. And Chapman's a great school, but if you're not T14 sometimes, depending on the economy, it's tough to get a good job, truly. And so I want to give back in that aspect. But I think communicating and talking and bouncing ideas off of lawyers, especially like the more attorneys you have in a firm, like the more ideas you can bounce. I think that sharpens your legal skill set and keeps you competitive in this world.
Yeah, totally agree. How many attorneys are you up to now?
We're at 6 attorneys.
6 attorneys. And so I totally agree that, you have to have this bullpen or fishbowl or whatever you want to call it, where you're like, hey, I got this crazy situation. You guys ever seen this before? No, I've never seen this before. And nowadays with webinars, it's like you could do it during your lunch break. Like it's on your computer. You should be obsessed with your craft, right? I want to hire lawyers, and I'm sure you're the same way. Like you want to hire lawyers that care about being good lawyers and care about being obsessed with their craft, especially when you as a business owner have so many things to take care of. You're like, I need you to take care of being the best lawyer you can be in this firm, right? And if you need money, I used to tell my team all the time, like, if there's a seminar or there's a class that you want to go to, and the reason you're not doing it is cost, like, of course I'm going to cover it. Don't worry about that, because I want you to become a better lawyer so that our clients are better served. Like the $300 it costs for the CLE is irrelevant. Just it's covered, because a lot of times, like, there are a lot of webinars that are just, kind of marketing tools and aren't really quality education. But if it's a quality education webinar and it's, $500, the ROI on that is ridiculous. You have to do it, So if there's something there, I always tell them, like, just tell me. I have no problem paying for you to get better. I want you to get better. At the end of the day, it's better for a client. So I want to shift gears a little bit as we come towards the end. A couple more questions, and then I'll let you get back to crushing it. Something that every business owner has gone through, and I'm sure you've gone through this too, is kind of that one hell day or hell week where you're like, it's over. Did you have that? And if so, what was it?
Yeah. I've been pretty lucky. We've been able to maneuver a lot, but quarantine. So you're a lawyer, everything's cool, you're like getting through life, and then boom, there's restrictions. You can't go into the office. Courts are closed. People can't drive. Like, it's crazy, right? And you're handling car accidents for a living, right?
Yeah.
Crazy time. And you take a pause back, and you're like, yeah, this is a little bit sooner than I thought my story would end, but okay, like I'm prepared for it. Like, this is where the book ends. But excuse me, what we did there, something I got lucky too. When COVID hit, we weren't a very big firm. I think there might have been like, I don't know, like 8 employees or something like that. So the smaller you are, the easier it is to pivot. That's a benefit that small firms have. Like you can make moves that a big firm can't move. Like thinking like these insurance companies that are leaving the state, like it's going to take them a long time to leave the state, right? Because there's such a big conglomerate, such a big corporation. Like you're just too big to move fast, right? But a little small business can make moves a lot quicker. What I ended up doing, and this pivot really I think was, it was a hell week. It was a hell month. It was a hell time that probably sprung my law firm the furthest it ever did was when the courts closed, when you couldn't advertise for new cases. Like, what are you gonna do, right? Like, what happens then? And so, I thought, and then everyone's offloading their employees because, like, I can't afford them. They're big firms. I can't afford my employees anymore. So I was able to, and I think it was the Chinese character. I think it's for chaos, which is like, or crisis. It's opportunity and chaos. It's like two characters put to one, but there's an opportunity in a crisis. And so what I figured was, okay, this is the cheapest I'm ever going to be able to bring on teammates. I'll never get this opportunity again, probably. So I started hiring paralegals at that time. I was running a pre-litigation firm. So in 2020, I started hiring paralegals for very reasonably priced because they're looking for jobs and people are working from home. So I bring on paralegals because I noticed, yes, courts were closed, meaning that the trial attorneys, they're hurting.
Yeah.
The big billboard attorneys, no one's driving. They're hurting. Insurance companies, they're paying you pennies on the dollar because they know the courts are closed, right? So like that was the realm that I was living in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, but there's a middle part called litigation, like the discovery, the paperwork that nobody wants to do. Like nobody wants to do that. Like no, I can't say nobody, but you don't wake up being like, let's do discovery and like
exactly.
respond to those frogs, right?
Yeah.
So I brought on paralegals and I reached out to firms in our neighboring areas and I'm like, if you guys have any lit files, like pass them on like we'll litigate these cases. And so I probably acquired like 100 lit files, and these are, and anybody that does personal injury, like if a case is going into lit, a lot of times there's issues with the case, right? Yeah. There's fleas on the case, and there's no perfect case, but there's fleas on the case. Right. And so I took on and somebody else's law firm, right? I don't know what kind of legal work they did, but I took on 100 files of just like not the greatest cases and tough liability cases and weird injury cases, causation cases, all that. And I worked through that for a couple of years, actually. But those cases were settling because there was litigation going on. There's action. Like you didn't need the court for litigation, and you've already acquired the client. So that kept my firm busy. I ended up like staffing more people, and I was able to like turn cases for money at that point, settling other law firms' cases. So it was a very tough time for me, but I found this opportunity that really like sprung our firm to the next level.
I love that. And I think one key takeaway here is mindset, right? And I don't want to sound like some Instagram guru that talks about mindset, right? But like, it's true. Okay, quarantine hits, right? Yes, you're spending money on advertising and you're not getting cases, but you're still stuck in those advertising contracts that you still have to pay, right? And so you have no choice. You have to keep paying and you're not getting cases. You were a pre-litigation firm. That was the business model you have been building. And you realize like, hey, for me to stay afloat and continue this dream, I need to make a shift and take on litigation and double down on hiring people and moving forward and shift into this litigation space. And I just don't have a choice because that's where the opportunity is right now. So having that mindset of being able to pivot and say, okay, well, this was my plan, but my plan ain't working. So I'm going with a different plan. And to do that, it's that's why some people are successful. And if you talk to the most successful people, it is because they've been able to pivot most of the time, many times, and reinvent themselves. So I commend you for that. And I think that a lot of people don't do that. Another thing is when something like that bad happens, you really are only out of business if two things. One, you run out of money or you quit. That's it. Right. But things can go bad. You can let people go. You can stop advertising campaigns. You can even tell advertisers like, hey, I'm not paying your bill. Come sue me if you want to. We'll deal with it later. Like you could do things, but if you run out of money or you quit, then you're out of business. So as long as you got money in the bank, absolutely, you can keep going forward and figure it out, I mean, it's true, right? There's times where you're like, there were times when I started where I'm like, I would send vendors like, half the check, like half the invoice. And like,
Yeah,
then they call me. I'm like, but that 2 months that I bought myself helped me get the money to pay for the second half of it. You know, you just get through it.
totally.
You know?
That's a really good point.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and so final question before we wrap up here. This has been awesome. And the question I like to ask everybody is, if you could go back and talk to the younger Ali, whether he's in law school or whether he's starting his practice, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to enjoy the process more. Um, when you're younger, you have this goal in mind and you have this like vision for your life, and you're like, I'm not going to be happy until I get there, right? But the next thing you know, like a decade of your life has passed you by, and you're going to get there, right? And I'll tell them like, your day will come, your time will come, but enjoy the process on the way there, because you're never going to get that time back. And there's glory and there's enjoyment in every step of growth. And so enjoy the process, not the destination, because you know, once you hit the apex of the mountain, not to say that we're there by any stretch of the imagination, we have a long ways to go, but once you get to the top eventually, you got to the top, like that's it.
Right.
It's almost game over at that point.
Right.
It's game over. But like the real game is getting there, and enjoy that process.
No, that's great, man. Thank you, Ali. Really appreciate you being on. Thank you all for listening or watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bootstrap Solo. And remember, just because guys like Ali make it look effortless, it doesn't mean that it is. And one ask for all you listeners, if you enjoyed the pod, please share it where you share stuff. If you think it'll help people, send it to them. LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere you share it, it helps us. We can only grow if you let others know about it. So we appreciate your help in doing that. Thank you, and see you next time on Bootstrap Solo. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.